I'm Angel Menudo, a licensed clinical social worker, certified clinic coach, and a little Will with a passion for manifestation and internal family systems. Through the years, I noticed that New Age manifestation practices relied on spiritual bypassing and positive thinking only, instead of getting to the root of potential blocks and barriers or building self-worth. Then I found internal family systems, and it had changed the way I saw manifestation. Each week, I will discuss how to use IFS to tap into your true self energy, build your self-worth, and work with those parts that are sabotaging your manifestations and, frankly, your life. This is not law of attraction. This is getting to the root of what's blocking your manifestations so that you can be open to the universe and manifest the life you've always wanted. So join me on this journey to learn how to live in alignment with your true self and break free from limiting beliefs, expectations, societal pressures, and the other things that are keeping you stuck from living your best life. It's not a coincidence you're here. Welcome to the True Self Manifestation Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of True Self Manifestation Podcast. Today, we're going to actually talk about our parts and what that all means and how it relates to manifestation. So last episode, I talked about true self, how true self is our authentic self, our intuition, and gave us some insight on how to tap into our true self energy. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I'm going to suggest go back to episode 2 and check it out. I think it'll be really helpful. But today I wanted to get into the parts and what all of this means. Now, all of this is going to be through the lens of internal family systems and the use of parts work to work with our parts. But what do our parts have to do with manifestation? And the thing is that our parts can actually interfere with our manifestation practice. To be successful and consistent with our manifestations, we need to be in our worth and in alignment with our true self to be able to connect with the universe. Our parts can pick up on things throughout our lives that stop us from connecting with our true self. Instead, there could be a lot of fear, a lot of judgment, expectations, or limiting beliefs. None of this sounds like we're in our worth or we're in alignment with our true self. And you might be asking, what exactly are parts? In internal family systems, or IFS, parts are described as a person's sub-personality. So there are sub-personalities that are in there. Parts are best considered internal people of different ages, talents, and temperaments. So all of our parts actually have all of our emotions. So there isn't one part that is just sad and doesn't feel any other emotions. It has a broad spectrum. It just might be feeling that emotion more intensely at that time. Just wanted to put that out there. And as I've said before, we're born with our true self, and we are born with our parts. The parts are what make us human, and they help us navigate the world. However, throughout our childhood, our parts have taken on new jobs and roles in order to keep our system safe, our internal system. They become either vulnerable parts or protector parts. The vulnerable parts are the parts holding traumas or emotions or behaviors deemed quote-unquote bad. These vulnerable parts get exiled away, so they kind of get locked up. And our protector parts work tirelessly to avoid those vulnerable parts from being activated or triggered, or, in other words, from coming out of exile. These parts often blend with our true selves, and with that, we feel like we've lost all control. And I'll give you an example. Say you have this shitty interaction with your boss. They are reprimanding you because you did something wrong. And at that moment, you feel really, really small. Maybe like a little kid getting in trouble at school or being reprimanded by your parents or caregiver. Then you feel like that shame, that guilt, then increasingly anxious. You ruminate and overthink the interaction. You lose sleep over it. Now these are the parts taking over the system. That feeling of being small is a part, most likely a vulnerable part, remembering all the times it was reprimanded in the past, but you feel it, that guilt, that shame, maybe that sadness. This part is blended. It is like right on top of you. And then the anxious part tries to protect the system by trying to come up with ways for it to never happen again, never to be reprimanded again, because it doesn't want to feel that like shame, that guilt, that sadness. It doesn't like, so it'll just overthink it and ruminate about it. And you're losing sleep over this. Or using that same scenario, but swap anxiety for anger. Instead of getting anxious, you get pissed. This part wants to burn the motherfucker down. But ultimately, it's trying not to feel that original feeling that the vulnerable part felt. That guilt, that shame, that sadness. The protector parts are trying to keep the system safe. They're trying to keep the vulnerable parts from being activated or triggered. And they learn how to do this at a young age and kept going doing these jobs, despite the fact that you inevitably can handle the situation more effectively if you were given the opportunity. Because, now you're an adult, you're older, you're wiser, you're no longer that little child with very limited resources. But our parts don't get that. Not until we tell them anyways. So through my years, though, as a psychotherapist, I've noticed more and more often that women, in particular, exile away our angry parts. And not us personally. I'm talking about the other parts. The other parts exile away our angry parts. And that, again, like I said, it's usually because we were told that it was inappropriate, or either we saw anger from somebody of authority at a very young age, and it was incredibly frightening. So either way, our parts learned not to express this emotion. Think about times when you were told to be nice, be kind, to be considerate, that it's not appropriate for a girl to get angry. It's not polite, or it's not even cute. Even when the other person did not deserve the kindness or politeness, even when that other person was pushing boundaries. Or was there ever a time when you stood up for yourself only to be torn down and made to feel ashamed? Or maybe you do show anger and get backlash for it because it's not quote unquote appropriate. Men, on the other hand, are actually allowed to show anger. It is the main emotion that the men in our society are allowed to express. It's absolutely okay for them. They become bosses, women become bitches. So you can see why our parts have decided to exile away our angry parts. They think it will make life easier if we are good, if we don't complain, if we people please, don't rock the boat. What shows up more and more for women instead is anxiety. Or it's the anxious part trying so hard to get it all right, all correct, all the time. Are you ready to end the unconscious cycles and patterns sabotaging your manifestations and experience true magnetism without the blocks from past programming, conditioning, and limiting beliefs so that you can manifest your most amazing life? If you said yes, then I invite you to check out my e-course, How to Manifest Without the Self-Sabotage. This e-course uses techniques from internal family systems to help you align with your true self energy and begin working with those parts of you that have been sabotaging your manifestations. By using these evidence-based practices, you are shifting perception of yourself and the world around you at the root, helping you reprogram and retrain your brain so it is no longer running off of invisible scripts based on past programming, conditioning, and limiting beliefs. Use code 50OFF for $50 off your purchase of How to Manifest Without the Self-Sabotage e-course. The link is in the show notes. Don't wait. Grab this transformative e-course today and start manifesting your most amazing life. But as our parts continue to exile away parts of us that they think are more harmful than helpful, we lose more and more sense of ourselves because all of our parts are here to help us navigate the world successfully. Even though They think they're trying to help us. These parts that exile the other parts away, ultimately they aren't. These are what I call the shadow parts. You've probably heard about the shadow self, which was coined by psychoanalyst Carl Jung. He saw it as the uncivilized, even primitive side of our nature. But the thing is that we all have a shadow self. And it's generally just made up of those parts of ourselves that we deem unacceptable, or the other parts deem unacceptable. For many people, this means things like our sadness, our rage, laziness, or our cruelty. Our shadow parts can ultimately be one part that was deemed as unacceptable by our caregivers or school, something in younger age. Say as a child, you wanted to be something like a baker. And there was this part of you that loved to bake. It brought you so much joy. But you were told by a parental figure that it was not acceptable. You couldn't make a living as a baker, that you are wasting your time, that you should pursue a field that is stable and will bring in a good income. Now, the other parts heard that, and they realized that this part that loved to bake was not helpful for the system, so it becomes exiled. And that's because they're trying to keep everything all good in the system. And that also means they're trying to win that approval from that caregiver. Also, they want that love, and they found that if they continued baking, say, then that caregiver would not love them. Not saying that that's true or not, we don't know, but this is what the parts are thinking. And the thing is that there's so much depth to our shadow parts. So many things that we miss out on because those parts are being exiled away. Our shadow parts aren't scary like they may seem. They're children. They're younger versions of us. They're our inner child that just needs love. But we can't get to them because the protector parts are trying to keep them from us for the sake of keeping the system safe. The thing is that it doesn't work. It's a faulty plan. This is because the protector parts are also usually young when they take on these roles as well. And they just don't understand that things change. I think that I've mentioned in the first podcast, but it's like the parts have blinders on. They just keep doing their jobs without realization that we've gotten older, we've grown physically and emotionally, that if given the chance, we, true self us, can actually manage all of this with the help of the parts instead of the parts taking over. And remember, all parts have positive intentions, and there are no bad parts. But if our system is working just on trying to keep the system safe in a sense of not getting those vulnerable parts activated, how well are they really helping us, right? Like, if they're working overtime to try to make sure that something doesn't get activated or triggered, that's a lot of work for these parts to be doing, right? That's a lot of effort. That's a lot of energy. Again, it's a faulty plan. If that is all that our protector parts are worrying about, is to try to not get our other parts triggered so that they don't have to, quote unquote, like clean up the mess, but instead they are putting us in all of these different situations that really aren't in alignment with true self us, that's where the issues happen. And like I said, I mean, there's no bad parts. They all have positive intentions. But you can kind of see how this all plays in with the idea of manifestation. So when we're manifesting, right, we want to be open to the universe. We want to be tapped into our true self so that we are energetically working with powers beyond us. And if we have our parts constantly coming in and blending with our true self and not allowing us to even take the time to do these things, or maybe they have ideas of their own, of what they want to manifest. It's really not actually in alignment with our authentic self, our true self. That's where we have issues. So our parts often, like what I like to call is like our self-sabotaging parts, are a lot of our protector parts that have taken on these roles based on what has happened to us in the past, like I said. But they sabotage so many aspects of us, including our self-worth. So when our parts are working for us instead of with us, we're not able to tap into true self, nor are we able to really feel worthy. And I know I mentioned in the first episode briefly about the self-sabotaging parts, and I listed a few off, which were the inner critic, the people pleaser, the perfectionist, the procrastinator, the caretaker. These are just a few examples of the self-sabotaging parts that I've seen the most when looking at what is happening and what the blocks are in our manifesting. So these parts, unbeknownst to them, because again, they just mean well, but they wind up blending and then they wind up blocking our manifestations. We can't feel really in our worth if we are constantly having that critical part kind of tearing us down. And we can't truly understand what it is that we want in life if we can't tap into our true self. I've noticed that a lot of times we will manifest through a part, say, a perfectionist part. And maybe the perfectionist part wants everything like this ultimate, right? Like this ultimate luxurious life. And because it will look perfect. It doesn't know why otherwise, right? Except for the fact that to everybody else, it will look fabulous. But if we can tap into our true self, have that part step aside, and we can find out if that's really true, is that really what we want? And maybe it is 100%, because it can be. However, if it is based on what we as our true self us want, there's usually reasons other than because it will make us look really good to other people. There's usually much deeper things there, that we want. And the thing is that everybody is different and everybody manifests for different reasons. But if we actually want our manifestations to come through, we need to be able to actually manifest from our true self energy instead of our parts. Using that perfectionist part example, here's another way that it can block our manifestations. As in, it is trying to get it perfect. Just the process. It is overthinking the process. It is analyzing the process. It is afraid to fail or make mistakes. And you don't wind up getting anywhere because this perfectionist is saying, well, the process itself has to be perfect. And that's not true. If that part is taking over and you're noticing I am really focusing on this, the idea of this process and it has to be absolutely perfect, you're not in true self. And that also goes along with the idea of the law of attraction, right? And those types of new age manifestations, practices that are all about positive thinking only. And so we could actually have a part of us that winds up taking on this new role that I like to call the love and light part. And this part realizes or recognizes or thinks that it is the best thing for the system to be absolutely positive all the time. Positive, positive, positive. Just love and light, love and light. And what it's doing is it is pushing away any other part that has any other feelings. And it also is like, we'll just meditate on it, or we can't think that way, only love and light. But, it's like you sometimes, and I'm sure maybe you've noticed this, right? You can see people sometimes who try to evoke this love and light only positioning, which is this part that is trying to take over or is taking over. And in their eyes, I don't know. I mean, I noticed this, but like in their eyes, like you can see there's something else there. And it's probably anger. It's probably overwhelm, frustration, anxiety, something else, but it is just not allowed in. And so when we have that love and light part that is saying, well, let's just meditate. Let's just think positive because it's trying to do all the right things. It is completely disregarding and invalidating all of the other parts because we need to be able to feel and express all of our emotions. That's what being in our self-worth is all about. When we can effectively express all emotions, even the ones that people deem bad, if we can express those in a healthy manner, we are in our worth. So going back to the idea of that angry part, when that angry part does actually wind up blending or taking over, especially for women, because it's being shoved down, and exiled, it will come out raging, right? It will just be like I said, burn the motherfucker down. But the key is to work with that part because it's not scary. It doesn't need to be raging. If it is co-piloting with our true self, instead of throwing true self out the door and locking it and barricading itself into the control room, we are then able to go from maybe raging or aggressive or saying things that we really wish we could take back or don't mean to being assertive, confident, in control, and able to express ourselves effectively. That's magic too. Let me tell you, when we're able to have this relationship with our parts where we can work with them instead of them taking over, it gives us so much power. It is true empowerment to be able to have that part help us in certain situations that we need to step it up and confidently and assertively set boundaries or say what we need to say. We are then empowered instead of maybe putting our foot in our mouth and saying something that we did not mean or saying it in a way that we did not mean, therefore having to backtrack, and whoever we're trying to set that boundary with or be very assertive with, they kind of get off, right? Like they get off, like whatever they did, now it's fine because we reacted. And I'm sure people can relate to this because it's incredibly frustrating. So if there's anything, I mean, hey, I would love to be able to teach all of you to manifest everything in the world for your wildest dreams because, I want to see people be the best versions of themselves. But if that is anything that I can help you all with today is being able to use your angry part for you to be assertive and to maybe have that people-pleasing part step aside so you can do this. My job is done. But no, not really. My job is not done. Again, I want y'all manifesting the best lives in the world and being the best versions of yourself all overall. But still, it would be awesome. I would get the biggest kick out of it. Oh, wonderful. Okay, I digress. The big thing is that we need to notice if our parts are coming up and if they've been blending with us. We need to learn how to be in tune with ourselves. We need to reconnect to us, our bodies, and have awareness of what is going on internally so that we can pick up when the parts are blended, and we can ask them to maybe take a step back, give us a few steps back, give us a little space so that we can engage with them while we're in true self. Women are so disconnected from ourselves and our bodies. And this process helps you learn how to reconnect with you, recognize the parts, recognize true self, gain that empowerment and that control over your internal world, begin to have harmony, bring out maybe those shadow parts, reparent those vulnerable parts, work with those protector parts so that it could be much more easier and manageable for all of you, including the parts, because the parts are exhausted, as I've said before. And then we're able to ask them to maybe take a few steps back. We can ask them to give us some space. We can engage with those parts of us while we're in true self. I'll be getting more into all of this in future episodes, probably even try to break things down more or elaborate more. And if there is something that I said that you want me to elaborate more on, email me, DM me at True Self Manifestation on Instagram. My email will be in the show notes. And in the meantime, if you want to try to see what parts are blocking your manifestations, I have a new quiz. I'm going to put that in the show notes. You can go on there. It's 7 questions. It's a lot of fun. And it will identify the main culprit, the main part that is blocking your manifestations. So that will be in the show notes as well, the link to that. When you do it, it will tell you which part it is. And it will also tell you how to start working with that part and probably the reasons why it's doing what it's doing. And again, it's not bad. It's not a bad reason why our parts are doing this. It's just not quite the best way of going about dealing with the reason. So please go on there, check it out, enjoy, and thank you so much for listening to the True Self Manifestation podcast. Yay, podcast number 3. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. See you again soon. Thank you for listening to the True Self Manifestation podcast. Check out the show notes for any links mentioned here, and while you're at it, grab my free mini course on how to manifest without the self-sabotage. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode, and please leave a review where you listen to podcasts. And if you love this episode, share it with a friend. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.